I want to call out someone very special in the audience, my wife, my love, my collaborator, a co-editor and co-producer on Harold and Lillian, Jennifer Rame. Please stand up. The very talented Jennifer Rame. Right on. Thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to bring it here and looking forward to answering questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a few questions and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to open it up to our audience. Daniel, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the genesis of the project, how you met this amazing couple. Just if you could tell us about that.
Sure. Harold and Lillian. So I was a student at the American Film Institute in 1997. I'm going to try that again. I was a student at the American Film Institute in 1997, and Harold came by to teach us a storyboarding class, and it was terribly boring. He literally put us all to sleep because he wasn't talking like he was talking in the film. He was talking about the geometry aspect of storyboarding. But when once the class was over and I saw him and my professor, Robert Boyle, talking to the side, I realized there was something really special about them as people and as communicators and as artists. And as I got to know them more as friends, and then Harold and I and Lillian and Robert Boyle, my professor, traveled from Los Angeles to Bodega Bay in 1999, where they had shot The Birds 37 years earlier. And we became much closer there at that time, and that became the material for one of my first films.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I used to teach filmmaking, I actually used Harold's storyboards of The Birds and showed clips from the film. Yeah. Had no idea who had made those storyboards until seeing your film. Yeah, I was wondering, like, it seems that you seem to focus on these unsung heroes, people behind the scenes, uncredited people. Can you talk a little bit more why you're drawn to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, when I was 21 years old at the American Film Institute and learning from them, right, they inspired me to become an artist, okay? And they inspired me through their warmth and through their very generosity of spirit and information and knowledge. And I felt like, and also I was really inspired by their personalities too. So I was basically got a little video camera and just started from there. Started just shooting and making. So a lot of this material that was formulated by Jen and I on an editing table in 2013 had its genesis for me in 1999 or 98. And the material that and I'm kind of diverting from your question, but the material that we found, the archival material of Lillian and her research library, stuff like that, from Harold's archive that he shot 8mm of Hitchcock at work, really gave me the sense that we could tell a story, make a documentary out of this, and it could be really telling their story. Yeah, as well. But ultimately, just to kind of come full circle with your question, Harold and Lillian is a lot of the production designers, storyboard artists really enjoy being behind the scenes. They're not necessarily looking for the spotlight. They're comfortable being alone in a room and not getting the credit. I mean, how many here really know what the production designer is? I mean, hopefully these films fill in an important gap in American cinema history, so that, you know, I'm hopefully, you know, putting a light on them that they would never want on themselves initially.
Well, we're glad you do. I thought Patrick Matté's storyboards, the original storyboards for your film, were really fantastic. They seem to capture the spirit of their relationship, the humor of their relationship, especially even Harold's poems and cards. How did that come about? Did you look for other people, or how did Patrick fall into it?
So I had known Patrick 20 years earlier, around the time, like 1998. I'd visit Harold and Lillian at the DreamWorks Animation Studios, and we'd all have lunch, and Patrick was a fan, sat at the foot of Harold, you know, and he was a character animator at DreamWorks. And by saying sat at the foot of Harold, all of DreamWorks sat at the foot of Harold because we all wanted to hear stories about how he worked with DeMille and Hitchcock. But Patrick was a pipe dream because he was very busy, working full-time on animated film. But he was in my mind from the very beginning, and when I presented him a rough cut of the film, where the challenge was essentially, why do I need Patrick Mattei? For every documentary filmmaker, when we're trying to tell a biographical story that happened in the past, that draws back, you might have some photographs from their wedding, but to really fill in the gaps and visualize and bring the audience into the shoes of the characters, I needed something on the level of Patrick's art to bring that in. And so when Patrick eventually saw the rough cut, he was very moved by it and felt an intimate personal connection to their story from his own life. So he brought to the storytelling through his images emotions, feelings, and ideas that connected his own experience as a person who's both trying to have a life and a career at the same time. The tension in that. But the relationship was, working with Patrick was amazing. And when he agreed to work on the film, I was over the moon. Yeah.
The film, at least for me, drew me in because of love of film and cinema and behind the scenes. But then what really stands out, of course, is this remarkable relationship. And there's something a little ironic for me in the title, Harold and Lillian, A Hollywood Love Story, because although, they were a Hollywood couple, this is not a love story in a Hollywood sense. This is very real. They had an autistic child. They had a lot of struggles, and there's so much wisdom, I think, especially out of Lillian's mouth.
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, what did you take from that? How did that affect maybe even your collaboration with your wife?
I'd like to definitely bring up with Jen, and there's two things on that. Number one, Los Angeles as a town is filled with tens of thousands of hardworking professionals, that blue-collar artists, essentially, that live in Hollywood city, not Hollywood the idea. So to come to the metaphor of Hollywood. But what did I learn? As the film evolved and working with Jen was great because she advocated, apart from her storytelling skills as an editor, she advocated to really move Lillian's story, her inner life front and center, as it relates to the challenge of being a woman in today's society, and also looking at her story. And for me personally, I identified very much with Lillian's childhood and her growing up and having to overcome a lot of emotional, trauma and coming out a great human being in so many ways. And the challenge, essentially, by a great human being, someone who's able to clearly give and receive love. And I think that aspect of the story helped me today swivel my editing chair around and spend time with the family as much as possible. I hope Jen's laughing. And really look and be in the present tense with my son and my wife and appreciate that those are the things that are important. So the tension between your career and your life, and what is your life? Is your life your career? Is your life the flesh and blood human beings, the people who are in front of you? Is your life your art that you dedicate to, as do I? Or is your life, the flesh and blood human beings that you spend, that you live with?
While we're on the subject of Lillian, the fact that she's Jewish, I only surmised because I saw her name on an envelope in the film. But it's not, Harold's Jewish mother looms large in the film. I was wondering, was that something that was consciously left out, or just?
That's a great question.
This is a Jewish film festival.
I know. That's what I'm going to have to be quite frank. I wasn't thinking about the Jewish Film Festival circuit when I was making this movie. I was oblivious to it, but I'm proud to bring it here, and so is Lillian. In fact, she told me that her favorite film, and she's worked on over 300 movies, I don't know how many, is Fiddler on the Roof. And also, sort of outside. I think Robert Boyle, who the production designer for Fiddler on the Roof, and Harold Michelson, who spent a lot of time in Yugoslavia storyboarding on location and all that. But what's your question again?
Just Lillian's Jewishness.
So I wasn't looking at it from the lens of the Jewishness. You know, I'm Jewish, I'm born in Israel and grew up in the United States, served in the Israeli Defense Forces and shot documentary films while I was serving at the Israeli Defense Forces. But when I was making this film, I was looking at this kind of the themes for me were universal. I wasn't thinking about that. But she did tell me a great anecdote after the fact that when she was in an orphanage for young girls, it was a Christian orphanage, and at night, at dinner time, all the girls would have to pray before supper, and the nun of the orphanage came to Lillian, and Lillian was closing her eyes. She said, "Lillian, you don't have to do that. You're Jewish." So, anyhow.
Okay.
I wish I added that in the film. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. Last quick question. Do you want to say anything about what you're working on now?
Yeah, I'm doing a few projects, documentary projects, among which, for the last 6 years, I've been interviewing principal artists that worked on Fiddler on the Roof, including the lyricist Sheldon Harnick, who's 92 years old, and I just spent an amazing afternoon with him shooting a very in-depth interview with him, and Chaim Topol and Norman Jewison, who's not Jewish, by the way. And there's some great stories there, and I'm going to eventually develop that into a film.
Okay, we can't wait. Let's open it up to our audience for the last few minutes. Do we have any questions?
So great.
Nate has a microphone.
Hey, I got a question, Dan.
Hi.
What's it like working with Danny DeVito?
What's it like working with Danny DeVito? He's terrific. He supported the editing process and got to run a cut with Danny and his editor, Lindsay Klingsman, who cut One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was amazing to sit with them and learn about storytelling on that level. It was awesome.
Back row on your left.
Yes. Do you have any idea how Lillian's was orphaned?
I do. I do know, and it's a part of her story that she asked me not to go into in a public way. It was so strong that it would have overshadowed the whole film.
Other questions?
Yes, waving hand over there.
So I just have a question. When you're making a documentary and real life is not linear, so how do you find a way through all the stories to the one story that you're going to tell?
That's a great question. I start with a linear cut that's about 5 hours long in chronological order to get a scope of everything. And then at some point, you just have to decide what the story is about. So I rely on the theme, so to speak, to sort of give me a direction into how I'm going to distill. Like, I have 60 years, 2 careers, an intertwining love story, an inner story of Lillian, Harold's love story to Lillian, and sort of finding the essence of that and trying to distill it. And then when I arrived at the ending, about halfway into the editing process, which took 2 years from start to finish, that gave me direction as well in terms of coming full circle. And I decided that I wanted to do what was traditionally frowned upon in filmmaking, which is the cradle to the grave narrative structure, which is like, you can't really put 60 years of somebody's life into a story, but I felt that was the story.
Last question, back row on your right.
Thank you for a terrific film. And I have a question about the mother-in-law and the aunt. Were they ever in touch with the family in Los Angeles?
Yes. The mother-in-law flew out from Miami. The aunt, I don't know. Aunt Seal. I don't even know if that's what she looked like, quite frankly. But it felt, we work from what the feeling is. Lillian swears that's what she looks like. She's like, Patrick, how did you get in my mind? How did you know? And it's not like we had photographs to work from. But I think that Lillian stood her ground, and she had 3 children, and they loved their children, and I think that Harold's family accepted her, for better or worse. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Daniel, and thank you for this wonderful film.
Thank you, and I have one more. Thank you so much. One more very quick.
One last thing.
So we're making. We're going to be releasing Harold and Lillian Hollywood Love Story, and we'd love for you to follow the film. And I think that because you have a pen here, a little pencil, and a little white sheet of paper. If you want to give us your email, Jennifer, can you stand up, please, and hand up your email to Jennifer? We would put you on our newsletter, and that way you can have information about when the film will be released on DVD, digital, and theatrical. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
And Fiddler on the Roof.
And the Fiddler on the Roof film, too, that's coming out. And I hope to be standing here again.